So welcome everybody. First of all, I just want to say that I hope everybody is well and staying safe. I think that's like the most important thing to us, obviously. We have an exciting program tonight on the Quonnie Life-Saving Station. Just so everyone knows, we are recording this session so that for those who can't participate tonight, they'll be able to watch the program later once we post it to our website. So I just wanted you to be aware of that. For those who don't know me, my name is Joan Lawler, and I'm currently the president of the Quonnie Historical Society. Now, the board hasn't let challenging times disrupt the important work that we're doing. Without missing a beat, we quickly moved to a virtual meeting. I think that started right after March. And rather than foregoing our, typical summer programs, we made the decision to offer the programs virtually as well. I want to especially thank Tom Doyle and Rich Wells for the numerous hours that they have spent evaluating the best platforms to deliver our programs. They just did an amazing job. Tonight is our maiden voyage using a virtual platform. So we just hope that you're patient if we have to work out any kinks or anything. One thing I also wanted to mention was an exciting new project that we are working on. It was proposed by Leah Bradshaw, one of our board members. I believe she's on tonight. But Leah, Sandy Champion, and Donna Jordan, they're going to work together. They are working together to capture reflections of the 2020 pandemic in Quonnie. You may have received emails from us on this. If you haven't and are interested in helping, you can find more information on our website. But we're just trying to capture those reflections like others have done in the past, particularly like the 1918 pandemic. There were a lot of histories about what people were going through, and I think we have our own unique set of circumstances here. So I'm going to turn this over to Rich Wells, who has organized this event tonight, and he will introduce our guest speaker. And Rich is also going to provide some instructions just to make the night go hopefully a little smoother. Thanks, Rich.
Thanks. This screen shows the mute button and for both your video and your microphone. We have, when you started the meeting, you'll notice they were muted, and we'd like you to have those remain muted for the entire presentation. It'll make the presentation go much smoother. We're going to use, instead of asking questions, we're going to be able to post questions. And so if you're interested in asking a question, if you're down to the bottom of your Zoom screen, you'll notice in the middle where that yellow arrow is pointing down, there's a little box that says chat. If you click on that, it opens up another box where you can post a question and you can see some of the other questions that other people have been asking. So we hope that you'll ask as many questions as you like, or if you want to make a few comments, we're going to try to get to as many as we can at the end of the presentation. The next piece is a little history. When I was, I think it was last fall, we were invited, the board of the Quonnie Historical Society was invited to take a tour of the, and I'm trying to think of the name of it. It is the, what's the building called, Amanda?
The Watercraft Hall, or the Collections Resource Center.
Okay, the Watercraft Hall. This building is really special because it houses all the boats that aren't on public display at Mystic. And Mystic has an incredible collection of boats in this facility, and it was just nice to kind of see the different boats and hear a little bit about their histories, and we really enjoyed that tour. But apropos of this session tonight, while I was walking along, I met Amanda, and we started talking about the Quonnie Life-Saving Station, and intriguingly enough, Amanda seemed to be an authority on this, and come to find out she's from Nantucket, and she served several years at the Nantucket Life-Saving Museum. So being a board member and always being on the lookout for some good presentations that we might have at our summer sessions, I asked Amanda if she'd be willing to do a presentation, and she graciously accepted. Now, I think when she did that, she thought she was going to be presenting like at the Quonnie Grange and have maybe 42 to 50 people in attendance. And what she's getting tonight is probably a computer screen, a microphone, a video camera, and 3 faces maybe on the screen, just to give her a little bit of a that there are live people out there. But I really appreciate Amanda doing this tonight, and being our kind of our guinea pig for testing this out. And we really appreciate that. The other thing I want to say about Amanda is not only is she very knowledgeable about the life-saving stations, she also has gone out of her way to explore different histories, the different history of our Quonnie life-saving station, and has spent a lot of time doing research, including spending time in the Mystic Archive Center, digging up some very interesting material, and I think everybody's really going to enjoy some of the things that she's discovered. So, Amanda, thank you very much for being here tonight. I know we're all going to enjoy your presentation.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, thank you for inviting me. Thank you everyone for attending. I have a lot of slides, so I'm going to try to not run too quickly through things. But again, my name is Amanda Keenan, and as you can see, I do like dressing up. I realize both of these are actually me in different time periods. I work at the Mystic Seaport Museum now. I've been there about 12 years, and I started my career in museums when I was 14, working at the Nantucket Historical Society and then the Life Saving Museum. So when I was in the Watercraft Hall, we have about 450 boats. I know about 20 of them. So when I found that there was a surf boat in the collection, I talk about it because it's one of the boats I know about. So I think that's what triggered Rich and I to start chatting about the life-saving service. So this is
I have to mention, Amanda, that is you in that dress, which we asked you to wear tonight, but I guess it was too hot.
It was, it's in Mystic. I did do Mrs. Rathbun's hair. So that is, I tried. That is my role-playing character who lives in 1876. She is not a lifesaver, but her brother is part of the life-saving service. So I still find a way to sneak that in there. And on the left is me in the 1920s at an event we had at the museum last year. And that's my husband. So you might see another picture of him later on. All right. So this is what we'll be discussing tonight. I could do probably an hour on each of these, so I will try not to go on too long. First is just to talk about the life-saving service. What is it? Most people have never heard of it. Then Quonochontaug, so Quonnie. So how did it end up in your neck of the woods, and how is it different? Wrecks and rescues in the area. As I said, sort of as we were chatting before we got online, I kept finding more and more shipwrecks, and Charlotte Young kept sending me pictures of other shipwrecks I hadn't heard of yet. So that list is just growing and growing and growing. So the other thing is the U.S. Coast Guard. That is what the life-saving service becomes in 1915. I don't have a lot about that. Spoiler alert, the Quonochontaug Life-Saving Station does not survive the hurricane of 1938. So it no longer is standing. And of course, at the end, we'll do questions. So in case someone came in late, please type your questions in the chat. I won't be able to see them as we go, but at the end, if I haven't covered it, I will do my best. I can't promise I will know all of the answers. But to talk about the life-saving service in general, it started in 1871. It went till 1915. And really the highlight is it saved 168,000 lives of people across the country. It was started by this man over here, Sumner Increase Kimball. Epic facial hair. You'll see a lot of good mustaches in this presentation, just due to the time period and the fashion. He actually worked for the Department of the Treasury. So we think of the life-saving angle as the good PR side, but really the funding comes from the Treasury to protect commerce, to help make sure there are less shipwrecks, render aid to people, and help salvage operations to get the cargo if that ship is wrecked off of, make it, save some of the value. He reorganizes the service when he goes to assess it in the 1870s. It had been around since the 1840s, but when he assessed it, it was random sheds around the country with an old boat in it and maybe an old guy next door who volunteered sometimes to go rescue people if he felt like it. So he rebranded it and really pushed to build stations, have uniforms, have a very organized hierarchy. They built 271 stations across the country. 10 of those are in Rhode Island, and 30 of them are on Lake Michigan. So we kind of forget about the Great Lakes and their impact on maritime history, but they were a huge part of the life-saving service as well. The gentleman on the right is William F. Saunders at Mystic Seaport. His descendants have donated a copy of his diary. We have his scrapbook, and we also have his letter book, as he wrote letters as the keeper of the Quonochontaug Station. He would write them in a book that would then make a carbon copy. So he'd mail one off, but he'd always have a copy of what correspondence he had mailed out. So I've been very nosy into the life of William because I've had access to all sorts of great information about him. Keepers are the captains that are in charge of the station. There's one keeper per station. There are 6 or 7 surfmen who are ranked below him. William started as a surfman, so this is him as a young man, actually at the Watch Hill Life-Saving Station. And they're ranked 1 through 6 or 1 through 7. On one side of his jacket, you can see the insignia. If he were to turn, on this side would be the number that he would be. And number 1 is the best. 6 is the worst. So, if you literally want to work your way up, and then if there's a new opening for keeper, the number 1 guy tends to be the guy who moves up. Stations are manned by the keeper year-round, but only by the men in September through April. So when the weather is really bad, when the nights are long and the days are short, and a lot of bad things can happen on the ocean. So that's when they tend to be fully manned. In 1915, they decided to merger. There had been the Revenue Cutter Service, the Steamboat Inspection was its own division, Lighthouses was its own division, then there was the Life-Saving Service. And in 1915, the government just mushed it all together and made the Coast Guard. So that is much more of it functions much more like the Navy or the Army or other military branches. And so these are the first styles of life-saving stations. So they're very Victorian. They are covered in this sort of line. They look kind of like a barn. They just have one door on the front. They have an open viewing platform on the top that was also used to fire at with the cannon to set up the breeches buoy until they set up wreck poles, which you'll see later. They realized firing a cannon at your building when you're practicing, aiming it probably isn't the best idea. So they switched over to wreck poles. The one in Watch Hill you can see down here in the bottom sort of area, again, looks very, very similar. And as the needs progressed, they modified the buildings or they tore them down and built new ones. So in Surfside, so this is Nantucket. Obviously, I have a soft spot for this building. Let's see if I can get it to. There we go. This is just a zoomed in view. My favorite part of this building is the dolphins or little sea dragons that are up in the little eaves there as part of its stylized gingerbreading. And below that is something called the Francis Life Car. It's this sort of white thing. It's a metal sort of container that you can put shipwreck victims in, close the hatch, and then pull them to shore. This is interesting because there are 2 kids with their heads sticking out, so it kind of gives you a sense of scale. And we'll see one of those at the Quonnie station later. And this is the Nantucket Life-Saving Station in Surfside today. So Tom actually said that he stayed here. It is a youth hostel. When Tom stayed, he said it was $5. I think it's probably more than that now, but it is still a youth hostel. And you can see that they made changes to the building that match it to the Quonnie station. So they have multiple barn doors. They make it a little bit bigger, and they enclose the viewing platform at the top. And this is just an example of all the different things that you'd have to do at a life-saving station. The men would be keeping lookout from the viewing platform on the top. They'd be walking along the beaches, doing night patrols, looking for shipwrecks, listening for people in distress, things like that. But during the daytime, they would also be practicing. So Monday and Thursday is the breaches buoy drill, which I'll show you a video of just in a minute. They would also be practicing using the boats, rowing the surf boat, lifeboat, in good weather doing a capsize drill. Wednesdays, signaling, different flags and ways that you can communicate before the time of telegraph and things like that. Friday is medical information. My favorite description of the life-saving services medical training is restoring the apparently drowned. They had a basic understanding of hypothermia, frostbite, and trying to revive someone who has been drowned. So they don't really have CPR or the Heimlich maneuver, but they have something similar to that. They're trying. So that's what they do on Fridays. Saturday is maintaining that building, making sure it looks good, making sure everything is in tip-top condition. And then Sunday is the day of rest. People will still have to do their patrols, things like that, but that's typically the day that the men would have off. So the breaches buoy, this is going to be a short little video showing you how it's set up. You would fire a cannon out to a shipwreck and set up what we call a zip line today, which has a buoy with some breaches sewn to it that you can pull back and forth and rescue folks. I'll show you how that. I didn't do the point of view descent version because I was afraid that'd be a little disconcerting for everyone on Zoom. So this is what you can see when you come to visit Mystic Seaport. Not at the moment, but hopefully in the fall or next year, we'll have the demonstration squad doing this demonstration again. So in the top left-hand corner is a picture that my husband Barry took standing at the top of the wreck pole looking down. My friend Maria is the one in the basket going up down the zip line there. And the other side of the view that you'd have is down in the bottom left-hand corner. That's actually taken at Quonochontaug and was used as a postcard. So they would fire a cannon with a small line attached to it and a heavy 20-pound projectile and send it out to the shipwreck. Now you don't have a shipwreck to practice on, so they'd have a wreck pole, which is what you see kind of in the distance. It's just a stick with a platform. And you're gonna try to aim at that. The shipwrecked men are gonna pull on that smaller rope and pull over that thick rope, the hawser that you can see in the top there that has the red bandana on it. They're also gonna pull over the whip line, which pulls the basket back and forth. And instead of using the buoy, you can attach that metal thing, the life car. So that's how it's done in practice. On the right side is how it actually works in real life. So we didn't have a photo of one in Quonochontaug, but this is in Watch Hill. So it's showing you the scale of how to rescue people using this method. And the distance on it is about 700 yards. So if the ship is further away than that, or if it is too dark or the people cannot respond to the instructions, they would use one of the boats to go out and rescue people. The capsize drill, the photos around the big image on the right are another location showing you how they'd flip the boat over and turn it right side up. Up in the top there is the Quonochontaug guys proudly standing on a capsized boat. They've capsized it and hopefully they can right it again. they're wearing their summer whites or their summer sort of warmer weather outfit. And they're also wearing cork life vests, which are this canvas with chunks of cork sewn on them. And that's sort of the PFD that they have at the time. So Quonochontaug didn't really come along, and actually Joan helped me out. So I had some trouble pronouncing this, so this was her phonetic help for me saying Quonochontaug. That station was not built until 1892 and existed until 1938. And for those of you not familiar, Quonnie is where this yellow star is in Rhode Island, and the arrows are kind of showing you commerce. So how many boats are really going by? A lot. We don't have the interstate system. We don't have airplanes. You don't have cars really doing a lot of transporting. There is no Cape Cod Canal, so you've got to go all the way out and around. So any ship full of people, if there's an overnight steamboat going from Providence to New York, anything coming into New York from South America or from Europe, basically has to go by the Rhode Island coast, and a lot of things can happen. This is the 3rd district, so this is where you guys are located. The first stations are built on Block Island. That makes sense. They're kind of out there where a lot of wrecks happen. And as you go along, they build more and more stations. And you can see there's just this gap where Quonnie is. And it's not until 1892 that they fill that gap and build the Quonnie station. And the reason for that is things like this. So there's a great book called Shipwrecks in Rhode Island by Charlotte Young, and Charlotte's on the call today. So she found all these great images of shipwrecks, and this is one that occurs right out in front of Quonochontaug in the 1880s. There's no life-saving station yet. So this is 8 miles away, and the Watch Hill crew has to hike all the way down the beach with their equipment to get to the shipwreck. They are able to save everyone. Unfortunately, there is loss of life later during the salvage operation of this vessel. But things like this were making people think, okay, maybe we need to invest in a station in Quonnie. And so they did. So the location of the life-saving station was across the breachway. The old breachway, which I found out through Rich, kind of curved around the back side of the station. And the station is the first of its kind. And in the life-saving service, if you are the first location where they build a new type of station, it gets named after you. So the Quonochontaug design was built, 20 other buildings or 21 other buildings were built in this same design across the country. And it's known as the Quonochontaug style station. It has a bunch of improvements on the older stations. Number one being that it has an enclosed viewing platform on the top. You have to be up there all night long. In February, they realized it got chilly, so they put a roof on it and made it a little more habitable up there. And the other thing they realized with the big barn door is if you want the beach cart or if you want the surf boat or the lifeboat, it's like your garage at home. If you just have the car in there and you want to get, to the snowblower, you have to take everything out, get to the thing you want. And if someone's life is in danger, that is time that you need. So they built 3 barn doors. On the front side, which is on the left, you've got the surf boat, you've got the beach cart door. On the back side, you have, in the right-hand image, you have a launch for the lifeboat, which is a little beefier, a little bigger. Can't really be launched directly into the surf. So it goes down that ways into the old breachway, which is, Quonnie is great because most life-saving stations, they just park it on the beach. They don't really have any water access in the back. So this makes this design really unique. You can launch your boat at the back, be in a quieter area of water, get it going, go out the breachway, much more effective. Downside of the breachway is if there's a shipwreck that requires the beach cart on the other side of the breachway, you have to load the beach cart in a boat, get it across the breachway, then use it, which they did do. I've pulled a beach cart around. It's really heavy. I don't know how they did it, but they did. And this shows you the inside of the station. So I've kind of merged 2 postcard images together. It's a little wonky because they had to stand on either side of the lifeboat. But you can see that they've got the 2 boats. They've got, those are the front doors there. And then there's the Francis Life car sort of hanging from the rafters. Below it is the beach cart that has the spools of rope, cannons in the back probably, ready to go. So this is the inside of the station, which is really cool. And this is the station location, as I mentioned. So Rich helped me figure out kind of where this was. If you go across the breachway, and there's a small pond, and there's a nice stone wall right there. That's where the station was. And the old breachway kind of curved around a little bit. So that's where the station was located. And this is just another great, there's tons of great postcards of Quonnie. And they always took pictures of the life-saving stations at this time. So a lot of great images of the station. And there's them using the boat there. I'm not sure if that's the Eldridge Hotel in the background, something else along the boardwalk there. On the other side of the breachway. My Quonnie history isn't that good, but that's where it is. The other fun thing I found, there's a wonderful antiques dealer named James Claflin, who I've worked with at the Life Saving Museum on Nantucket. So I went to his website and looked to see what antiques he had for Quonnie. Apparently, you guys sold to tourists a creamer and a plate. So these exist. You can purchase them yourself. And they have the lovely image of the Quonochontaug Life Saving Station on them to remind you of your vacation. So as I said, there are 21 other buildings. So although the one in Quonnie doesn't exist, there was actually another famous one. Since it was the newest design in the 1800s, in 1893, it was featured at the Columbian Exposition. And that's what's circled in that blue area there. This is what it looks like. So they've modified it slightly. It had garage doors basically on the front and on the back to access this little lagoon. So this was actually out in Chicago for many years. And sadly, since the one in Quonnie doesn't exist, some of them still do. So at Ammonegasset in Long Island, you can see their life-saving station. They've fully restored it. This is sort of where the men would sleep on the second floor. This is it from the outside. So when things get a little bit better, you can actually go visit a station that is very, very similar to your station. All right, so this is the man that we know way too much about. This is William F. Saunders. In his diary, this is the forbidden romance that I sort of teased in the beginning. He is a farmhand on the Langworthy farm. He's the youngest of, or he's one of 8 kids. So he, gets a job, is living at this farm, working on this farm, and we have his diary. So he's talking about, he calls Alzada Langworthy, who is the farmer's daughter, Zeta or Z. So, there's little diary entries, have had a talk with Zeta, trouble, parentheses, agreeing to work for Mr. Langworthy. Z says that the old folks are mad about our sitting up, meaning, hanging out, sitting around and chatting at night type thing. And unfortunately, her father does not want her to marry the farmhand. Her father passes away in early 1876, and then October 4th, 1876, this little entry here, he talks about, fishing, eels, centennial, and it says, stop by Elder Stillman's, then went to Stonington. Stopping by Elder Stillman's is him actually getting married to Zeta, and the centennial is their honeymoon. And so William really illustrates what the life-saving service could do for somebody. So he doesn't join the service until a little bit later, but he doesn't have a lot of prospects in this area. It's a very remote rural community. So when a life-saving station is in town, it's a steady paycheck for the winter months when maybe you didn't have a lot of money at that time. And also it's a great honor. These guys are eventually become like rock stars because they're doing, heroic rescues. They're in all of the newspapers and magazines. So, and one of the letters that I found was really impactful. He was a surfman at the Watch Hill Life-Saving Station, and a gentleman, Captain Fullerton, wrote to him 4 years after, and basically says, when I landed in Westerly and grasped your warm hand, the heart of welcome and warm place under your arm for my cold hand when I first stood on terra firma, clear of the breakers. The same gratitude remains now as then to lifesaver volunteers and all. So Mr. Fullerton, Captain Fullerton, was on the ship the Fullerton and was rescued by William Saunders and wrote him this letter 4 years later. The letter also says, you know, how are your kids? You know, bring them to Somerville, come visit me. So as much as I've studied shipwrecks and life-saving, I've never seen a letter like this, and I'm sure there are more. But I just thought that was really interesting. So when the Quonnie station opens in 1892, this is the motley crew of men. I know I'm talking to maybe descendants of some of these people, so I hope I don't start anything. But, you know, number 1 man all the way through number 7, you know, Thomas T. Saunders, he's a quiet fellow and he speaks, he has a kind word for all. Charles Church is a powerful man of 26. He's a typical South County man who possesses all the nerve and strength required in duty. So I won't go through and read them all, but Charles Church does come up later for not great reasons. And they kind of mislabeled people here. They say that Gavitt is in the middle, but very clearly that's Saunders, so they're flip-flopped. And they talk about the cook William, but they also have Mortimer Lanphier. I think W. Lanphier to be Mortimer in this picture. They talk about, you know, them playing banjos, and, you know, one of the guys is the lightest on the team, but he is a good man. So they really have an interesting crew. The other man I would point out is Asa Hoxie. He has a bit of a sad story. William Saunders actually wasn't supposed to be the keeper of the Quonochontaug Station. It was really supposed to be Alfred Hoxie, and during a hunting accident, he's actually shot by Asa Hoxie and is killed. They were quail hunting. Quail comes out, Asa turns, and unfortunately Alfred passes away, and so it goes to the next guy in line. It goes to William. And Asa is the 7th man, which means he's lowest on the totem pole, but he's the one that the keeper trusts, and he stays kind of lower in the ranks throughout his entire career, even though he is very good at his job. So it's kind of intriguing to me. I don't know if that has anything to do with the accident that occurred or anything like that. The other thing is I'm a crazy cat lady, so if I can find a way to include a cat in a presentation, I will. So when I did a oral history interview with a nice lady on Nantucket, she mentioned that the life-saving stations all had cats because they're at the end of the earth. They have food stored out there. They'd have cats to keep the mice down. I didn't know if that was true for any other station, but this is a drawing based on a picture, and so they at least had one cat out there that was friendly and old for a photograph. So I thought I'd point him out. The other interesting thing is I have these 2 images. The one at the top is from the newspaper article, and the one below is actually from a gentleman, Vorojan Hartnence, who wrote a book about life saving in Rhode Island. And he wasn't able, he says that this, and they mentioned cook, but they have no there's no picture of the cook. There's always one man short in these pictures. So there's obviously a little person who is in a chef outfit. So I'm curious to know if that is if that's William Lanphier, or if this is just a photo of a different station. But I also had never heard of cooks at life-saving stations as a special skill. And this guy, Willis, as he's known, had been a cook on board of a steam yacht. Just rave about this guy, basically saying that he was for a long time a steward aboard a steam yacht. A cook on one of those floating palaces has to know his business. So they at least had good food for the first little bit there. And this is later roll call for the men that were at the station in 1902. In the early 1900s, They do get a boost in salary. You can see that here. This older form has $60 per month. It gets bumped to $65 per month. Running this through sort of an internet calculator, that means the surfmen are making somewhere between $13,000 and $16,000, you know, for 8 months or 10 months, depending on what their shifts are and what they work. The keepers are making $1,500 to $1,800 a year. And in 2020, this would be between $42,000 and $50,000. That's what it says, but on this form, it says $900, which is half of that. So I know that for a fact, Saunders proposed, got a bunch of life-saving crew members together, and they proposed HR 12464, which was a bill before Congress, to pay the lifesavers better, provide aid for widows and orphans, and also basically work. Unfortunately, the bill did not pass, but some of these issues are addressed when they become part of the Coast Guard. So the drama here happens, but I found this letter talking about the anonymous letter, which is very interesting. So I'm not going to be able to read all of this stuff, but on 1813, William Saunders writes 3 different things down. He writes a letter to someone in Washington, D.C. about the anonymous letter that was sent to the Honorable Sumner Kimball, which is the main guy. It is proffering serious charges against him. You have no doubt an investigation is being done. The other interesting part here is he is saying also that the party who wrote them is a very bad man, whoever he may be. He then writes to the gentleman in New Jersey who handles the payroll. I'd like you to look at the payroll form 1819. And I want you to look at the past year, and I want you to examine the signature of Charles A. Church, and if he has changed the capital A, and if so, please inform me when this change was made. So they're trying to identify the handwriting on this anonymous letter, and they think it's Charles A. Church. The bottom part is an entry that William wrote, and he starts in the third person and ends in the first person. He says the keeper got the crew together to practice resuscitation and code signals. He also read the anonymous letter and made some remarks telling the men that I hoped they were innocent, and that if one of them was guilty, if he would humble himself and acknowledge the crime. Later on, Charles A. Church is transferred to another station. So I do believe that his suspicions might have been correct, but we don't have the anonymous letter, and I have emailed down in DC to see if someone at the Coast Guard, has this letter. It's got to be somewhere. It's just one of those sort of juicy details I found in my research. Another one was, this is towards the end of Saunders' career. He informed the assistant superintendent that Surfman H.L. Smith was saucy and abusive to me when I asked him to bring in some snow. And when I told him very pleasantly that I did not want to hear any of his back talk, he simply informed me in a very rude manner that I would hear it if he saw fit to give it to me. So things are not going well. And later he threatens to discharge him. Smith says, do it. So that's another sort of interesting tale here. So we'll go into a couple of the wrecks and rescues at the life-saving station. There is a theft. There is a shark attack. There's a lot of blizzards. It's mostly blizzards. But this is another thing that really strikes people. The unofficial motto is, for the life-saving service, you have to go out, but you don't have to come back. And the men saw that as a point of pride, because you can't just look at the ocean and go, it looks really scary out there, I don't want to go. Their job was to go where people would never have gone before and where it was incredibly dangerous. The unofficial motto, because it is a little dark. And this is a rough list of some of the incidents and things that the men responded to at the Quonochontaug Station. Every time I tried to finish this slide, I would find more. So there's a lot here. I'm just going to talk about a couple of them to talk about Yeah, so there's also a big gap you can see in the corner there between 1912 and 1953. There are probably tons of them in there. I don't have a lot of info on the things that happened when it was the Coast Guard. The Herald actually happens when there's no Coast Guard fire off of the coast, and is used as an example to say, hey, you need to bring back, the Watch Hill station because these people needed help and you weren't able, to get over there in a quick enough time. Everyone was saved, but they weren't able to save the vessel. So the station opens in 1892. In February, we started Point Judith, and it wrecks on February 10th. The cook and the captain refuse to leave, and there is debate about how to get them off of the ship. They stay on board until February 18th. So they were trying to salvage the ship. The ship was built in 1880. If you get a chance to visit the Mystic Seaport, then we have a wonderful exhibit about the Benjamin F. Packard, which is 1883, but we have its cabin as an exhibit that you can go and see, and it's gorgeous inside. And when they're talking about the Jean Paul, they talk about how gorgeous the captain's quarters are and how much that must be worth. So I imagine it's fairly similar. And the men are ordered, a hodgepodge team of men from Watch Hill, Point Judith, and Quonochontaug are ordered, stay by this vessel, watch for it, and get these guys off the boat, when you can. And they're there for 8 days, watching this vessel. They stay inside someone's bathing shack, which is just like a shack where you change, into your bathing outfit. So that's where they're staying. They're in the elements. When it gets too bad for them to stay on board, they try to launch the surf boat for 3 hours and are eventually able to rescue the men off of the vessel. But it's said that William Saunders, it never fully recovers. He has ill health for the rest of his life, and it's why he retires early. Surfman Peckham, who's part of a different station, dies several months later. So it was a traumatic wreck. The other interesting thing is that the Jean Paul lived on. Sisson, who was one of the members of, Albert Sisson, his name's right on the slide, was a member of the Quonochontaug Life-Saving Station. He got salvage rights to chunks of the Jean Paul. So up on Route 1A, he built the Jean Paul lunchroom and cabins. So he built his house out of this wreck, and then he built a sort of lunchroom off of the back of it. And it's called the Jean Paul after the shipwreck. And they talk about, pieces of the railing and capstan bars and things being used. And today this is the Eckel Insurance Building. So I stopped there last night, took this picture of the sign out front, was able to realize which building it was. I'd love to reach out to them and know if any of those bits and pieces still exist in the building. I also don't want to ruin the summer for everyone, so this one will be quick. In August of 1896, there was a shark attack off of basically 1 mile off between Noyes Point and Quonocontaug. Charles Beatty, who was 26, there was a crew of men who were part of the Providence Railroad. They'd have a summer retreat once a year, and they were on the steam yacht Helen May Butler. And at 5 a.m., the men go into smaller boats and they kind of cruise around near the beach. Charles decides to take a dip in the water, and his friend Taft noticed a strange expression come over his face. Taft threw an oar to him and then jumped in the water to render assistance. Taft tried to pull his comrade into the boat, only to find that there was something drawing him beneath the water. He sank and did not reappear. And even in the article, they talk about it must have been a school of sharks. There was one that was just caught, was 400 pounds off of Sabin's Point. So the life-saving crew out of Quonnie, even though they're not really working in August, do try to go find Charles, and unfortunately are unable to locate him. There is, of course, some other lovely shipwrecks that happen that are left as a total loss. So they kind of become landmarks. So the Annie Cruz is left in Quonnie. Everyone's rescued from the vessel, but it's not worth anyone's effort to try to refloat her. What cracks me up is this wonderful postcard from Quonnie. It says, "A pretty grim picture, but the best the town affords." Which I feel like is pretty cold. Quonnie is quite cute, doesn't deserve that. But this is from Charlotte Young's book, and I thought it was too funny not to include. Some of the other vessels that we have photos of is the Viking, which is a naphtha launch. Runs out of gas, parks on the beach. Nothing else was happening apparently in August 1905 because everyone shows up to the beach to check it out. They are able to refloat that vessel there. Another interesting one is the Bouquet. It was part of the B line. It was a cargo vessel, barge of coal that was part of 4 other barges being pulled by a tugboat. And it was the last boat in line. The boat, the rope frayed and it sank. The men on board signaled to the main boat that they were in trouble. And that just meant that the main boat sped up to try to get to Narragansett quicker. And that just meant that they ripped apart. Men hopped in the boat. They were able to sail to the Quonochontaug Life-Saving Station. Basically, they knocked on the door and said, "We were shipwrecked. Can you help us out?" So everyone was okay there. We don't have photos of this particular barge, but a gentleman named Mark Monroe discovered it in 2006. So we have images of what it looks like. He won't reveal the latitude and longitude. Why, I don't know. It's coal, so it's still out there. The other sort of tragic wreck that occurs off of the coast is the Larchmont and the Harry Knowlton. It's now called the Titanic of Rhode Island. Of course, the Titanic hadn't happened yet in 1907, so this is a later name. But a cargo vessel, the Harry Knowlton, is a schooner, basically is going along at night, is trying to avoid the Larchmont, which is a paddle-wheeled steamer. It's full of people that want to go from Providence to New York, and they're basically going to leave at night, sleep all night, and then they're going to wake up in New York City. It's a pretty common mode of transportation. The 2 ships hit each other. The Knowlton is convinced that the Larchmont is fine. It's a huge, huge vessel. And so the Harry Knowlton tries to beach itself in Quonochontaug. They hop into their own smaller boats, row ashore, and are saved by the crew at the life-saving station. Ironically enough, their boat shows up in Quonnie a little bit later. It just pulls up on the beach. They weren't able to refloat it, but they were able to get some of the cargo off of it. Sadly, the Larchmont is not as lucky. Where it hit, it sinks almost immediately. There is not enough time to get people into the lifeboats. Similar to Titanic, there are not enough lifeboats. And not like the Titanic, the captain is a pretty young guy, and the captain and the crew leave immediately. They do not try to help the people, men, women, and children, get on the boats that they need to be on. And this is in February, basically in a blizzard. So of the 170 people on board, only about 30 or so are saved. And so most of the people that are saved, they get pushed out to Block Island. Quonnie doesn't know that there's been this shipwreck because the men from the Harry Knowlton say, "We hit this big boat, our boat was wrecked, but I'm sure they're fine." So nobody knew until much, much, much later how bad this wreck really was. And this is the Harry Knowlton right off the beach. Another problem that happens with shipwrecks is that they cause other shipwrecks. So December of 1907, there's another situation of the tug Hercules pulling 4 other boats behind it, and it hits the wreckage of the Larchmont and rips, a hole in the hull of the Hercules, leaving all the 4 little boats behind it to sort of drift into shore. And this is the John C. Weinman that wrecks. There is another vessel, the A.A. Sumner, and that has a captain. It has a sailor on board, Everest Matson. And Everest Matson brought his wife along for her health, to be at sea. And unfortunately, their ship is wrecked as well. This is what it looks like. So a little rougher than the John C. Weinman. They basically have to pull Mrs. Matson out through the window. They can't set up the breeches buoy. They get a line to the shore. They tie Mrs. Matson to the rope and basically pull everybody to the shore. through the waves in December. And the quote from the newspaper is, Mrs. Matson was taking a trip for her health and today said that if she ever recovered from her misadventures, she would never again venture on the water. She does live for many years afterwards. Whether she goes to sea, I don't know, but I can agree why she wouldn't want to do that. This is sort of the last one I have. It doesn't involve a shipwreck, but this is from a gentleman, Luther LaRue, who talks about basically the beach was being undermined by the sea. Captain Wilcox basically went and rescued his cottage, moved it back from the beach. He said his prompt action enabled me to save my house, while those 8 of my neighbors sailed out to sea. I was just in Quonnie. I don't think anyone's house is, driftable at this point, but in 1913 they were a little more rustic. So this is the U.S. Coast Guard. I do not have as much about the U.S. Coast Guard. These are the keepers that we know about from the Life-Saving Service. So I've talked a lot about Saunders. He gives it over to Thomas Saunders, who is not related, but was his #1 man. Then goes to Howard Wilcox. Again, great mustaches all the way across. Well done. Then you enter the era of the Coast Guard, and there's a lot more turnover because these are men from across the country being moved every couple of years. It's not local guys at the stations anymore. And by the 1930s, things were winding down for the Life-Saving Service. And these are some photos of the Coast Guard crew in Quonnie, and some of the things that they did. Let me just move forward one more, or not. There we go. They did some modifications to the building. So they get rid of the doors on the front. They put an extra door on the back. Things like that. They can sort of expand. It looks like they expand the upstairs. And the Life-Saving Service sort of fades from the public consciousness as it becomes part of the U.S. Coast Guard. By the 1930s, people have airplanes. People have cars. Trains are much more functional. Boats have better modes of transportation and navigation. So a lot of the stations start closing down at this time. The Hurricane of '38 comes by, does a number on the entire eastern seacoast, and unfortunately destroys the station to the point where they don't decide to rebuild it. So I want to give a huge thank you to Maud Bailey and to Julia Matthews, who yesterday basically moved heaven and earth so Barry and I could kayak over to where the Life-Saving Station used to be so I can get these pictures. I really, really, really wanted to go see where this was. I have been doing research on this for months, so I just really needed to go see it. This is standing on the dune doing sort of a panorama out to the ocean. The new breachway is behind me. And you can see in the bottom there's this rock wall, and this is the rock wall that you see in the top picture here. Even on the beach right now where we saw, there's a little area that has some bricks that maybe could be where the chimney sort of lined up, or some sort of something for one of the outhouses out there. So this is the view from out that way, which I was very, very thankful that everyone pulled together and made it so we could go out there and see that yesterday. All right, so I hopefully didn't go too over or too fast. Does anyone have any questions? All right. So it looks like we just have one question, which I can answer. I don't know if Saunderstown, Rhode Island is named after that Saunders. I know that when he retired, he went to his family farm. I'm trying to see the name of it. I think it was called the Winnipeg, and it was over near Wickapog Pond. It was over in that area. So I don't believe that area of Rhode Island is named after this Saunders. I also have this extra slide that I didn't think I had time for. If anyone else has any questions, please let me know. But these nice people are on the left are standing on the wreckage of the Fred Carl, what we think is the Fred Carl. Of course, if there's a chunk of wreckage, go pose on it. Go get a good nice summer shot. The picture over on the other side is just another chunk of shipwreck that is just sitting there that people are sitting on. When I was talking about this, my husband or someone had made a comment to me like, oh, who would pose on shipwreck stuff or let their kids play on it because, you know, rusty nails and all that stuff. And I remember this bottom photo. I'm in the white sweater, about 4 years old, and a chunk of shipwreck washed up in Sconset on Nantucket. And of course, our moms dragged us out there to go look at it. And so we have our own photos on a chunk of shipwreck as well.
So that set your career going, right, Amanda?
Yes. Have I written any books on this? I have not written any books on this. I feel like I could at this point, or at least I want to write an article, at least about everything that I learned. I could probably do a whole nother hour just on the shipwrecks, but I just, you know, tried to be as quick as I could. Why not? I didn't know if anyone would buy it. I don't know. There is some great resources out there. There is this book, which is Lifesavers, Rhode Island's Forgotten Service by Burjan Cartnens. My only critique of this book is that sometimes the facts are a little fishy. He says Captain Saunders had 8 kids when he was one of 8 kids and he had 2 kids. Stuff like that is a little but there's a great book by Shanks in New York about the United States Life-Saving Service. That's fantastic. We need, okay. Elizabeth is pushing this, okay. All right, we will talk. Steel Pieces of the E to 1960. Thank you, everyone's being so sweet. I don't know what big chunks of steel would be sticking out and from where. That might be a good question for Charlotte Young, who again wrote a great book that everyone should get, The Shipwrecks of Rhode Island. The trouble with shipwrecks is also that they sink and then the ocean happens around them. So they do get buried in the sand and pulled back up and kind of moved around. I don't know. So my friend Allie's a plant, I guess. If anyone would like to hire you to do another lecture, how should they get in touch with you? My email was on the first slide. You can email the Quonochontaug Quonochontaug Historical Society. They have my contact info. My email is keenan.amandam@mysticseaport.org. keenan.amandam@gmail.com is my personal email. I also do Charlotte Taylor. I'm so sorry, I said Young like 3 times. I'm sorry, Charlotte. Okay, I'm sorry. So any firsthand accounts of keepers and crews about the 1938 hurricane? I don't know of any. We have oral history interviews with Edith Larkin, who talks a little bit about it, but she was maybe 10 years old at the time. So she really talks about being in school, and I believe they weren't in Quonnie at the time when it happens. Oh, the other thing I was going to say is that I am a role player at Mystic Seaport. I also did my master's project on with the American School for the Deaf. So I also do deaf history stuff as well, on top of Nantucket history and maritime history. Video recreation, I might have been Delaware or New Jersey, somewhere like that. The dream was that I was going to record the actual demonstration squad at Mystic Seaport doing the same demonstration, but unfortunately due to COVID, it wasn't possible. I thought I had all the time in the world to go get that video, but unfortunately I didn't.
So, Amanda, we may be able to get resources. I know you had a slide with some resources on it, and when we post the recording of this event, if we could also post those resources, that might be interesting to people. Look at that.
So this is the list of resources that I used for the lecture. And I apologize to Charlotte. I kept saying Young. Her name is Charlotte Taylor. My favorite book is the Shanks and York book. There also was, there's a wonderful database created by James Jenny for the Rhode Island, it's called the Rhode Island Shipwreck Database. You can go on and type a boat name in or type a location in, and it will tell you more about the shipwreck. I found that in the past couple weeks. So unfortunately, when I thought I was done, I had a lot more things to add. So yeah, no, please feel free to share the Coast Guard Museum. They're awesome. I had sent them an email because I'm trying to find more about that image of who I think might be Willis Lanphier, but I don't know. All right. This is
Okay, Amanda, thank you. I know you put a lot of work into this, and we really appreciate it. You did a fabulous job. We really want to thank you for that.
Well, thank you for letting me do it. It's a lot of fun.
Oh, good. I'm glad. And being
I like getting emotionally invested in new people that, you know, I haven't gotten to see.
Yeah, and hopefully, maybe not this
We're off
summer,
mute.
but
We just wanted to give Amanda a round of applause. Can everybody go off mute and give her a round of applause?
it may take a while for everyone to go off. My little hand.
Thank you.
But Amanda, thank you for being our maiden voyage on this, new way. And hopefully soon, maybe not this summer, but as soon as we can, we'll be back in the Grange and be able to see everybody. And I can't wait for that to happen. But, we wanted to make sure that we kept going in regard to providing some interesting information about Quonochontaug and the surrounding areas. But thank you again, Amanda.
Yeah, thank you.
This just shows you we have a couple of other events coming up. In July 22nd, we have Markham Starr, who's a documentarian. He's going to be doing a presentation on ceremonial stonework. He's a incredibly interesting presentation. He's going to come back on August 5th to do an event on Point Judith, the fishing portrait, another great talk. And then come August 19th, we're going to have our Quonnie Historical Society annual meeting. And this is going to be the first time we're doing this virtually. So we have some things to figure out. We'll continue to work on that. And then, as we usually do, we're going to have a program, and that will be on the discovery of a Quonnie World War II artifact that has a very interesting background. And so we're looking forward to that. But I want to thank everybody involved in this event tonight, and I think everything went well. We do hope to see you in the Grange as soon as we can, as soon as it's safe for everybody, and hopefully you can join us for our next event on July 22nd. Thank you again, Amanda.
Thank you guys so much. It was so much fun.
Good. We'll have you back, I'm sure.
Okay.
Good night, everyone.